In hundreds of jury trials, Nathaniel Lee is who you want by your side in the courtroom. You've seen the rest, now hire the best. Contact Lee, Cosell, and Feigley today. And now, to address the legal concerns of the community, Praise AM 1310, 95.1 FM presents Legally Speaking. Here are today's hosts.
Good morning. This is Nathaniel Lee. Thanks a million for joining our show today. We have so many important issues to deal with. And this week, we have Marlon Primes and Attorney Banks on. But I got to start out with to thank all those people who participated in the Juneteenth celebration. It was a wonderful experience, seeing so many wonderful things people doing across the country. Before we get started, Marlon, it seemed like that we got such a negative vibe from people that are trying to turn back the clock. What's going on with these outcast people want to get rid of Juneteenth, and what the purpose of Juneteenth?
Well, good morning, everybody. It's certainly a pleasure to be with you. I hope everyone had a great Juneteenth celebration. Well, as many of your listeners will recall, the Civil War was fought because of the issue of slavery. And the number of the Confederate States basically said that, hey, they are leaving the Union because of slavery. And there's been a lot of histrionics to make it seem as though they were only fighting for states' rights, and really kind of blurring the issue of, it truly was about, the enslavement of African Americans. After the fall of Richmond and the surrender of the Confederate troops, there's a number of diehard Confederates that fled to other parts of the country, some in Texas, and the U.S. Army did not get to those locations, particularly Galveston, until sometime later. And they came and basically indicated that, announced to those that were enslaved that there had been a Emancipation Proclamation, and they were now free. So became a holiday in Texas, and then, of course, spread throughout the country and became a federal holiday. But unfortunately, we're seeing some retrenchment. The president, made an indication that on Juneteenth that, hey, there are too many holidays, which is unfortunate because this is a holiday that everybody should, celebrate. We fought a war to make sure that we live up to the ideas that were stated in the Declaration of Independence and in our Constitution. And then a border state where I live, Ohio, we border West Virginia, and the West Virginia governor is in a bit of a controversy. He did, issue a proclamation, but, indicated that he was not going to recognize Juneteenth. And it caused a lot of confusion with state workers in that, they were told to report to work, but many of the buildings they worked in were not, operational. Unfortunately, instead of looking at this day as a day that we all should celebrate, it was the armed forces that, enforced, an important provision that, individuals, should not be enslaved. And it's something that we should all be able to come together. But unfortunately, instead of having this as something that we all celebrate, now you're starting to see people peel away and make it seem as though this is part of this alleged improper DEI, or diversity, equity, and inclusion. So it's certainly problematic and very disappointing because West Virginia was formed as a state in 1863. And, as soon as it was accepted in the state, it became a free state. And that was kind of the understanding of why they broke off from Virginia. So it's certainly inconsistent with the legacy, and it certainly is very unfortunate that we're not getting a full recognition of this important day.
Well, one thing that we learned, the states that seem like they're the most racist or the lowest educated, West Virginia education system is generally one of the lowest on the planet. They're oftentimes near the bottom of the national list. So you have a governor who is basically presiding over what educationally is the most efficient educational state of the Mississippi in the country. So uh, maybe he doesn't understand the significance of history and apparently don't care about it. But in any event, but we have a good story today. One of our uh, superstars, Attorney Banks, spent a lot of time in South Africa. And the reason this story is so important is that our president of the United States decided that South Africa was a hostile nation for white citizens and that they were being whatever. And it just completely fabricated. So we had somebody there for a while. And Attorney Banks, tell us about South Africa.
Good morning, Attorney Lee and Crimes, and thank you for having me this morning. And first, let me just state importantly that the National Bar Association, the oldest and largest association of predominantly African American lawyers and judges, law students, and law professors, we're celebrating our 100th anniversary this year. We were founded in 1925 in Des Moines, Iowa, and we'll be celebrating our 100th centennial anniversary during our convention that will be held in Chicago, July 26th through August 1st. And thank you, Attorney Lee. We, every year since 1991, the National Bar has convened an international affiliates meeting globally, and we've visited South Africa many, many times. In fact, in 1994, the National Bar Association was the only bar association that was appointed to be the official observers and monitor of the first free election in South Africa that resulted in the election of Democratic President Nelson Mandela. And so the National Bar has a shared history and special relationship with South Africa. And again, we've visited many times. And in our 100th centennial year, there was no other place that our president, Wiley Adams, would have led our delegation this year to South Africa. And we also visited the country of Zambia as well. And the purpose of our trip, and it's in this meeting, the International Affiliates meeting has long been a cornerstone of our commitment to advance justice and opportunity on a global scale. And it's really a vital platform for building professional relationships with lawyers and judges across the African diaspora and beyond. Our purpose is to foster economic development, investment, and empowerment, network with lawyers, judges, business leaders, and the people, exchanging information and comparing and contrasting legal systems. We met with the U.S. consulates in both Cape Town and Johannesburg, law students, business leaders, and of course, the Bar Association of South Africa and the Lawyers Association of Zambia. And to your comments, Attorney Lee, during our visit, we heard the outrageous announcement that the president was welcoming Afrikaners who allegedly were being 59 and who allegedly were being killed and persecuted, and talks of genocide and having their land taken away. And this is with respect to the farmland in South Africa. And this, these types of false statements have been made by um, Elon Musk and others dating back some years now, but there is no evidence that there is any genocide taking place with respect to white South Africans. So while we were there, we witnessed these 59 so-called persecuted Afrikaners being welcomed into our country at Dulles Airport. There is a law in South Africa which allows for eminent domain, just like laws that exist here in the United States, Attorney Lee and Primes regarding eminent domain. But there's so many steps that have to take place in order for any land to be seized by the government. Let me also just say that Afrikaners or white South Africans comprise less than 7% of the population of South Africa, and they also own over 70% of all the wealth. Unemployment in South Africa is over 40%. And that's due to historic, of course, and systemic inequality. And that's across all education levels, age groups, and gender. And this is one of the historic, unfortunate legacies of apartheid. As of this year, white South Africans own, and I just mentioned, roughly 70 to 70% of the country's private farmland. And so these claims of uh, genocide of white South Africans is absolutely false. Um, there are murders in South Africa, but the murder rate of white South Africans is less than 1% of the country's murder rate. So this narrative that there is genocide occurring in South Africa of white South Africans is absolutely and empirically false. Unfortunately, the unemployment rate of Black South Africans um, is over 40%.
Well, that's terrible. But what is the country like in terms of development?
Well, there's lots and lots and lots of opportunity for investment and development. And we were in many discussions regarding those investment opportunities while we were there. Significant, let me move to Zambia, significant opportunities for investment and development in Zambia, which is a Black country that doesn't share the history of suffering and pain that South Africa and um, the US does in terms of our um, Black people. Um, so lots of opportunity for investment and development, both in the areas of transportation, infrastructure, cybersecurity, the development of their cybersecurity and data protection, infrastructure. Um, Tourism is really, really huge. There's opportunity for even much more expansion in that regard as well. Of course, with respect to mineral development, there are many, many opportunities as well for investment in those sectors.
What is the primary source of employment there, you know?
I would say the primary source of employment, from what I could see, is in the, or let's say one of them is in the tourism industry.
Oh, really? Yeah, I didn't. It seemed like when I looked at the picture, they had these wonderful buildings and things like that, and that they had. I know during the pandemic, I watched that they had very little effect by the pandemic. They did very well versus the United States, but I never understood why the country, which had um, all these really bright people that had the high unemployment rate, that didn't make a lot of sense to me because I know they
Well,
had. Go
it's
ahead.
the same as, it's a mirror in many ways to the inequality that exists here in the United States. In South Africa, there's a variety, of course, industries that contribute to employment, and those include community and social services, of course, trade, finance, and um, business services is a huge employer. And then, as I mentioned, mining and manufacturing, along with agriculture, construction, and I also mentioned transportation as well. But um, there's still disparities with respect to education as well as housing as well. And um, and again, just a very, very high unemployment rate, particularly among young people. Um, and that's due to the fact that, resources are not, and employment opportunities, they're just not evenly distributed across the country. And so, as here in the United States, you see these systemic that date back to pre-apartheid, um, and beyond. You see the systemic inequality in terms of wealth accumulation across the country.
So, sound like you had a wonderful time in South Africa.
It really was a great trip, and we do plan to go back and discuss next steps on some of the strategies that we discussed with the National Bar, um, regarding how we can help. And we talked about education, continuing and formalizing educational exchange programs in South Africa, and looking forward to, um, of course, continuing our relationship and returning back real soon. And we will have a delegation of lawyers um, from South Africa join us at our upcoming convention in Chicago as well.
But thank you. Well, Attorney Prime, here's something that bothered me. We had this crazy murder of the Minnesota lawmakers this week. We had senator get arrested, this ICE thing, and what's going on? It seemed like to me that uh, political life has become much more dangerous in America than I've seen in a long time.
Yes, it's very unfortunate, and certainly our hearts and prayers go out to those that are impacted and their families. I mean, it's just awful. As many of your audience knows that I spent the bulk of my career in public service, and we make great sacrifice to work in these particular jobs. And it's just unfortunate that the rhetoric has just spiked to such a degree. Now, we saw this in the 1990s with the Alfred P. Murrah building, where just a number of innocent people were killed. In fact, there was a daycare that was in the federal building, and there, children, innocent children, that got killed. And I think, after that period of time, there was a movement in Congress. In my view, I think it's kind of what started this acrimony between the parties, and that was Newt Gingrich, that you couldn't be friends with the other side, you had to demonize them. And I think there was a thought process after the Alpha P Murrah building that, hey, maybe the rhetoric has gotten too heated, and there was a second thought to that. And I think it kind of dialed down. And now we're seeing it spike again. And, I think it was unfortunate that, we had the insurrection, and then, individuals that, were basically, attempting to disrupt a free transfer of power, were pardoned. And so, I mean, that just sends an awful message. Now, I'm not saying that, anybody currently is connected to that, but I'm just saying when you create that environment, when the rhetoric is so heated that you can't agree to disagree, this sometimes is the fruit of that. So I think, when we think about these particular incidents, we all, have to be more thoughtful. We don't know who is listening to what we're saying, and we just have to be more conscious of it. I think the other problem that this brings to mind is that the administration is, trying to claw back money that they've allocated for public radio stations. And, many people may be familiar with like Morning Edition and what comes out of Washington, D.C. But I had the privilege of working in public radio when I was in college. And these are, public radio stations around the country. And what's important in the through line there is that many people now do not, read a regular newspaper. A lot of them are going out of business. A lot of our local stations are going out of business. And this is the only news they're getting. And statistics are saying that people are getting the majority of their news from Facebook or TikTok, and this is not reliable. So it's easy for people to go online, and whatever crazy theory comes into their mind, they're able to get confirmation. So it's important that, we're not only responsible, it's also important that, we ensure that, those that we interact with, we're talking with them. And also it's important that, there be different types of media out there, not only public radio, but conservative media and other media, so people can get a balanced view. Because a lot of this stems from people just getting information that may be distorted, may not be reliable. And it's certainly a clear and present danger to our democratic structure if we don't take a second and take a deep breath, like many of us did in the 90s, and said, hey, things are running a little hot. Here's a particular methodology that we can use to try to dial things back. And I think that's what has to happen. Otherwise, we're condemned to repeat this sort of thing if we don't take a breath, a time out, and say, hey, has the rhetoric got too heated? Are people really getting both sides of the issue? Are they getting adequate information? These are, important questions that I think we have to answer, in my view.
I think, thank you, Attorney Primes. I agree with you wholeheartedly, but I think that this whole approach, this vitriolic rhetoric, it starts at the top. And from my perspective, in the short term, it started when the president came down that escalator, right, and declared his initial candidacy. And it's ramped up, since that time. And from my perspective, and you set out exactly, what the source of it is and what the problem is. But from my perspective, the rhetoric is intentional, and it's part of, an old playbook. What we're seeing that's happening is not new. What do? You first demonize and dehumanize the other side, right? And that's what we see happening. Then you stack the courts, right? Which we've seen occur. And you demonize the press. And so everything that is happening is intentional. And so from my perspective, how do you reverse that at this juncture? You're absolutely right. People are only listening to certain media, right? And social media, of course, is a large component of that and a contributor of that. I guess one of the things I'm thinking about is that we're singing to the choir, right? So is it important that we talk to other people that don't hold our views um, to try to dial this back? Because from my perspective, this is all intentional. It's, out of an old playbook, and it's being executed and orchestrated with specific intent. I mean, those people that wrote Project 2025, right, that the president didn't, have any idea what it was, um, they know that these executive orders, for example, are illegal and unconstitutional, but that's not stopping them from issuing them. So those are my thoughts. Um,
Well, I thank you very much. Those are good comments, but here's my problem with this. This guy, the assailant's name is Vance Bolter, according to the charges filed in Minnesota. I listened to the Attorney General because I was concerned that a person was charged with a second-degree murder. It didn't make any sense to me, but I'll explain to you later. But what he did is that he killed the Minnesota former House Speaker Melissa Hartman and her husband, and he wounded Senator John Hoffman and his wife. But the problem is he had a list of 45 targeted Democrats to murder. And then it gets worse. He carried out, according to prosecutors, surveillance missions, took notes on the home and people he targeted, and disguised himself as a police officer. And you're talking about the ultimate, we've not seen this type of target attended the federal building with Timothy McVeigh that Attorney Prime talked about. So my concern, and then we don't forget that January 6th, all those folks who tried to kill the vice president and people in the House, they all got a pardon. So in certain respect, it appears that not just rhetoric, but action by certain people have actually encouraged this type of violent behavior. It's abhorrent. And I don't see an end in sight. I mean, because every day I see people that are stroking the flames, and these people are listening to them, and the value of human life just seem like it's been diminished.
Yeah, I think in terms of, what we can do, because I think, Attorney Banks is right that, in some respects we're preaching to the choir, but here's something concrete that you can do because it doesn't have to be this way. There's something that previously was called the fairness doctrine, where, broadcasters had to, broadcast in the public interest, and there was a view that they had to share both sides of political issues and give equal time. And that got eradicated under the idea that, hey, if you have all of these, news stations, internet, a whole bunch of other things coming up, that people will sample different, perspectives, and that way they'll get both sides. And that hasn't happened. Instead, what people do is they may listen to Fox News all day, and they only get one perspective. Or they, listen to a podcast where, a particular individual may not be a journalist and have no journalistic standards, and they get a biased view. So I think if you want to do something about it, I mean, it's important, to your at least my perspective, those, in the audience, not only to register to vote, but those that you're supporting, indicated this is a problem. And it's important to go out and protest. I agree with all that. But we need to make sure that everyone who's protesting with us is registered to vote, knows where their voting place is at, and is holding people accountable that are running for office and trying to get their vote. Those are the only ways that you're going to eradicate this, and it doesn't have to be that way. And I think if something is not done, it is going to get worse. And now, not only, just to go to Attorney Lee's point, not only did this administration pardon individuals that for the first time in decades attacked our Capitol and were trying to basically kill the Speaker of the House, the Vice President, because they didn't agree, and they get pardoned. But not only that, on top of that, you have Ashley Babbitt, who was warned not to go into the House chambers. They broke a window. She was proceeding in there, and had they not stopped her, everyone would have the House chamber would have been breached, where a lot of the representatives were hiding. Well, unfortunately, she was, killed, but the family ended up getting a settlement for that case. And to me, I thought that was certainly unfortunate that anybody passes away, but to give her a settlement. And then you have individuals that have been pardoned for January 6th are now bringing lawsuits. So again, it just sends a message that, hey, anything goes, and it's very unfortunate in my view.
And these actions are right out of an authoritarian playbook.
Oh, without question. And then, just think about it. We've all been talking about Viktor Orban on this show. Well, the Conservative Union of the United States, they recently had a meeting in Hungary. And they proudly proclaimed that, hey, this is the model that they want to use for our country. So we really have to pay attention. And I really invite, all of your listeners to look what Viktor Orban has done. And a lot of that is similar to what you see in Project 2025 in terms of, limiting speech on the universities, shutting down universities, immigration issues. There's a lot of similarities. So if we're not careful, we can move to a system like that. And I think, a number of, Supreme Court justices and politicians have indicated that, hey, democracy is great as long as you can keep it. And democracy can erode quickly. And so that's why it's important for each and every one of us to be informed, listen to different types of media, making sure that you're, reading a newspaper, that you're going on a line, looking at, newspapers, whatever, to stay informed, and that you exercise that important right to vote and you encourage others to do so.
Okay, we have a caller. Caller, you have a question or comment for us today?
This is Pierre.
Morning, Pierre. How you doing today, sir?
Oh, good morning, everybody. Attorney Primes, Attorney Banks. Well, Nate, you drill on this every week. The problem with this country is, we're just not, a good portion of the Black community and voters just not showing up to vote, and young people, and that's why we're in the situation we're in today. We blew it in 2016. We blew it in, or whenever Trump got reelected, and we blew it the last time. And I don't think we effectively deal with insurrectionists and people like that. We didn't do it effectively after the Civil War. Every last one of them should have been hanged, but we didn't deal with that, and we've dealt with that for decades and centuries. And then we let this guy get back in office. I honestly don't know what the solution is. Attorney Primes hit it. I see the newspaper stand dwindle every day. I think I'm still one of the last people that buy a newspaper. It's just lack of information. And then this radio, right here in this radio market, we've got one station here in town that just pumps out nothing but Trump, 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 Trump. And they're allowed to do that because of our laws. So it's just going to be tough. One other thing I wanted to say before I get off, I know you're not on that topic anymore. Corruption and lack of the rule of law is a big problem in those African countries, but it all touches on what we're talking about and what you guys are all about too. So,
well, Pierre, what do you think we need to do differently to get the folks out to vote? What's your solution? What are the part is missing? Where these folks?
Well, you know what? I think the actions of this administration is going to push enough people to realize that they voted the wrong way. And I think we're going to do all right in the midterms. I think we're going to be all right. And I think we're probably going to be all right in 2028. But, you know, we've got a war brewing in the Middle East between Iran and Iraq. We got a president who seemingly doesn't know what to do. I think we all should be all in behind Israel, but that's what I believe.
Well, Pierre, here's the problem. Marion County has about 470,000 registered Democrats, about 220,000 voted in the last election. A lot of people that didn't vote were African Americans. So what do they need to do different to starting today to make sure we get that number up to 450, for example?
Well, everybody, it's not hard to go register to vote. It's so easy. But I work with a lot of young people. Voting in an election is the furthest thing from their mind. They're concerned about, you know, what's going on in their lives, TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, you know, doing their thing. It hasn't reached them. Now, if this country faces a crisis, and you remember what it was like back in the years that they were drafting people, that's one reason why they don't want to draft anybody, because then young people will get engaged and they'll start voting. But until there's some cataclysmic thing that affects the lives of everyday people, it's not going to change, Nate. It's just only people going to show up is me and you and all of the other folk who are engaged. But until there's some sort of social upheaval to the point where it actually affects some people's life, I think we're kind of there with all of these cuts and stuff. But I just don't know, man. We put out all the information you can. You try your best to talk to young folk and get them. They just don't want to get engaged. But now that Trump's cutting off some of this help and assistance, maybe people will start to get it. But until then, it's not going to change.
I'm working with an initiative to begin to collect and publicize the stories regarding how these policies in Project 2025 and in these executive orders, the personal citizen stories of how they're being impacted by these illegal and unconstitutional actions. And hopefully by surfacing, cataloging, and publicizing these stories, people will begin to understand what the impact is on themselves, on their family members, and ultimately on their community. So that's a huge initiative that some organizations are implementing as we speak, that we need to get these stories out there across media channels. And we've got to go where the young people are, and they're out there on social media. So we've got to make sure that we're flooding those channels where young people are consuming their information. But we need to get the stories of seniors who are, having problems because regional office, Social Security offices are being, closed, and they can't get access to information regarding their Social Security. We've got to get stories out here with respect to, this big ugly bill, right? That's going to make expansive cuts to Medicare and the SNAP program and school lunch programs. So it's continuing and ongoing education. And as they say, all politics, is local. So we have to thrive where we're planted. And I also think we just have to talk to people that don't agree with our philosophies as well.
Well, you have the same problem in Ohio. We don't have people not getting out to vote in your state either. What's the solution?
Well, I think, part of the challenges is that, people that are on the lowest rung of our society, that are just barely making it. I mean, people I grew up with, family members, hey, they're catching the bus, they're riding in, used cars. There's a lot of expenses. And if people don't see their lives directly impacted, and they'll vote for a change. Or what many, people did is they just didn't show up. They didn't feel as though, the existing politicians were speaking to the issues that they're confronting on a daily basis. And so they voted with their feet. Now, I think, Attorney Banks brings up an excellent point, is that, the problem is that, people do not understand, or there's not information out there about how this legislation impacts them. Or there's misinformation, like, for example, on the immigration issue. There was a constant rhetoric, hey, we're only going to go after individuals that engage in criminal behavior. Come to find out, many of our Hispanic brothers and sisters found out the hard way that that wasn't true. They're rounding up everybody. And the same is true with this, the bill being put forth by Congress, a budget bill. They're not, there's not adequate information about the fact that 11 million people might lose Medicaid coverage and what impact that's going to have on rural hospitals. We have some, communities around the country that in an emergency, it's going to be hard for them to get to a hospital, or they may not be able to get care. So it's really important that we're able to relay that information. The problem's even further complicated by what, your caller and, I've indicated, and Attorney Banks has indicated, is that there's, a substantial reduction in media, substantial reduction in newspapers. And so people aren't getting a full perspective. There's not an analysis of these very important issues. And, as a consequence, a lot of people are in the darkness.
Those are all excellent points. I wanted to just
say, Attorney Banks, let me get the caller real quickly and we'll come back. Hey, caller, you have a quick question or comment for us. Go ahead.
Yeah, hi. Thank you so much for taking my call, and I really appreciate your show every week. So I want to say that my personal view is the real big issue with why we're not able to get out the vote is because the Republicans have been very strategic. What they've been strategic about is for decades to limit how many people that are different from them to come into their organization. So that left the Democratic Party only for everybody else to go to because they weren't welcoming. And why they did that is they wanted to make their party monolithic. And then what they did was they used billionaires and rich people to fund the Republican Party to make sure that they have policies. They put people in place, as you know, the Supreme Court, blah, 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 to put people in place so that they can get laws and rules passed. They were very strategic. The Democratic Party is a huge tent. We're never going to satisfy everybody's wants and desires and things that they think is fair or unfair. We're just not going to have it. So we have turmoil. But these people are in lockstep with one thing and one thing only. You don't look like us. You don't pray like us. You don't live like us. And so therefore, you're not welcome, and we're against anything that has to do with anybody who is not like us. And that includes a lot of racist people, but it also includes a lot of anti-Semitic people. It includes a lot of other people, but they all have one thing in common. You're not like us. And so we're going to have a difficult time. They also strategically managed to take over news organizations. They went local. We were so busy worried about the national news and the big chain news out there. They went to their local people and took over local stations. And then that's how they managed to capture the people locally about what, telling them what is happening, even if it was false or even if it was true. They captured the narrative, and we didn't do that. And we fell into the whole, well, they're so liberal. We fell into all their talking points about being embarrassed about being liberal, we're not fascists, but whatever they called us. We were so busy trying to protect ourselves from those images instead of embracing them and saying, yeah, so what? What's wrong with being liberal? We're about everybody, even your people. So that's my personal view. Thank you for taking my call.
Okay, Attorney Banks, go ahead.
And she's absolutely 100% correct in everything that she said. Our tent is so big that it really is difficult to accommodate all of the interest. And then the other side of that is that we've been hearing that the Democrats, for example, forgot about the working class, the people that Attorney Primes, was it you that was saying that are just struggling to make ends meet, to buy food, to be able to fund their children's education, just to pay for basic expenses. And getting back to media, we're seeing that some of the public radio stations, the funding for those are going away due to various cuts that are being made by this administration. But I think importantly, we have to ensure that Black media continues to exist and is funded. And so I'm also happy to see, I think Pierre put in the chat box that with respect to my comments regarding making sure that we publicize stories of how we're all being impacted by Project 2025 and these illegal and unconstitutional executive orders and actions. And we got to call it out. We have to be very clear throated about our opposition to these things. But WVON, again, is an example. Pierre is saying that they publicize these stories every single day. So we really need to ensure that our Black media is funded and continues to exist.
The other thing too is we have to, hold our politicians accountable to, calling out extremism. John McCain, to his credit, when he was running against President Obama, someone in the audience, indicated, well, hey, he's not a good American, he's a Muslim, and all this other nonsense. And he basically says, no, we just disagree. He's a good American. Juxtapose that to this administration during a debate, when he was asked about the Proud Boys, the comment was stand back and stand by. So, we have to hold our politicians accountable to really push out, call out the extreme parts of any political party. And when you don't do that, there are consequences for that.
Well, so the issue, though, is that we need to come up with more creative solutions to this problem. I remember as a young kid, the first political rally I ever attended involved LBJ. He flew into our town on a helicopter and landed at the football stadium. And my mother took me to this campaign rally as he was running for president. And in that moment in time, that was doing segregation. However, the rally had both blacks and white, that appeared. At that time, we went to all black schools or all white schools, and he had the effect of uniting Americans. And so that was my first endeavor into the political realm. But what was fascinating to me, I remember parts of his speeches, even though I was a young child at the time. And it tells you that America got better days ahead so long as we get the right leader in place to get us back on the right course. I just think professionally, Marlon, I don't recognize that Justice Department that you spent your career working for. I don't recognize that department anymore. It seems like to me, instead of Department of Justice, it's more accurately described as Department of Injustice now. I don't get it.
Yeah, and that's something that we really have to, hold politicians their feet to the fire. Let's just juxtapose, what the department did in terms of their history. That famous picture of Little Rock 9 integrating, that was part of, and off to the side, there is individual from the U.S. Department of Justice Civil Rights Division. If you look at the Rodney King prosecution, when he was acquitted, they prosecuted him in federal court. That's the legacy of the Civil Rights Division. And now what we're saying is they're being repurposed not to do that initial important work of making sure that we don't develop into two societies, one getting benefits and the other not, as noted in the Kerner Commission report. And so it's something that we really have to have on the front of our mind's eye, and it's something that we have to basically indicate when people are coming for our vote that this is what we want. We want to see change. And the final thing is that we have to look more than just this administration. We have to look at the philosophies behind Trumpism and make sure that's rooted out and people are educated. And part of that whole idea is that we're going to have this repurposed Department of Justice Civil Rights Division. And it's important not only to fight it during this administration, but also, try to root that out, with future individuals that are trying to use his same philosophy in vying for leadership in the future. But I think you're absolutely right. There are a lot of changes, a lot of differences in terms of, where the Civil Rights Division was and where it's going. And as a consequence, they're seeing, individuals resigning en masse. So something that we really need to be concerned about and something that we really need to keep our eye on.
Okay, caller, you had a question or comment for us today. Go ahead.
Yes, this is Guy calling, and big ups to the initiative that Attorney Banks has taken and others around the country. I had an idea, this so-called ugly, big, beautiful budget bill that's before the Senate. What would you think about the fact that so many congressmen say they haven't even read the bill? What would you think about organizations such as the Urban League and your organizations trying to get the information about a particular bill before it actually is voted upon? In other words, if the congressmen don't have time to read it, maybe others in organizations around the country could read the information and help them out, so to speak. What do you think about that type of thing?
Well, they can comment, but here's the problem, Guy. The nonprofit organizations such as the NAACP and the Urban League and the different agencies, they have very limited budget. I mean, for many years, I've volunteered for the NAACP, and like the NAACP would support or oppose judges based on civil rights issues, not on ruling, but on how they treat African Americans or minorities, right? But I did that as a volunteer, and if I have to go check out a judge, that was on my own dime, my own expense. And so you never got any reimbursement, but you did an important job. Well, these organizations are grossly underfunded. And so these bills that go through Congress, 1,500, 2,000 pages, and they're technically written. So you have to take somebody with a certain skill set and an awful lot of time to go through a bill, right? But here's the other sad part about it. Rarely, if ever, do those people in the House actually read the bills anyway. And so they get an outline of the bill, but I doubt that most of those folks ever read the bill, not with the people I talk to, because every now and then I've read some of those bills and, it takes me, and I'm a speed reader, it'll take me a full 4 or 5 hours speed reading, just glancing through it, trying to get an understanding. And they're so long, and they have so many technical terms until, so even if they read the bill, half of them they probably wouldn't understand sometimes. So the point I'm making is that resources is a key element that we're lacking in terms of bills.
But we do have think tanks that are, reading these bills and putting summaries of these bills out. And many of us, for example, Project 2025, it's 900 pages, and I've read substantially, all of it, and there are summaries of it, on the web as well. But we have to take that data and we have to condense it down to one pagers, right? And specifically how those policies impact us on an everyday level. I put in the chat box, and one of the things we can do is to access the fivecalls.org application. And that application enables you to put your location in and then identify one of 60 issues that you're concerned about, and actually, call your congressperson. Is really the most effective way to influence policy. And so I encourage everyone to access the fivecalls.org application and begin contacting your Congress people, whether they're in red states or blue states. And this gets back to Attorney Prime's point regarding holding our elected officials accountable.
Real
Hey,
quick,
quick,
Attorney
quick.
Prime,
Go ahead.
Go ahead, sir.
Oh yeah, just a quick point. I mean, you guys are absolutely right. Our organizations need resources. A particular organization that I like, it's a Black think tank, the Joint Center for Political and Economic Studies. So, if you want to make a difference, hey, donate to them. NAACP, the Urban League, our, African American churches. These are people that really need money because this is a very important time in our community. And, they can have the best intentions, but if they don't have the resources, they're not going to be able to reach their full potential.
Any
We
closing
must
comments?
be in community at this time.
I'm sorry, what'd you say? I'm sorry.
We must be in community with all of the organizations that Attorney Primes just articulated.
Well, thank you everyone for joining our show today. And I'm sorry that we won't be able to get to all the callers, but join us next week as we deal with legal issues of the day. Thank you, everyone. And thank you for participating in Juneteenth. May God bless you all. Take care.